Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. We all know one of the most anticipated updates for Call of Duty this year is the return of Verdansk. Verdansk obviously being one of the most highly requested things in Warzone history ever since it was removed at the end of Cold War as we shifted into the Vanguard era of Warzone. Ever since then, it's been like, hey, new map, there's Caldera, there's Al-Mazrah, there's Urzikstan. These are what they are, but they're not Verdansk, which is kind of funny because for so long in Verdansk, after playing it throughout all of MW 2019 and Cold War, it's like, man, can we get a new battle royale map? Can we get something to change things up? And we didn't realize how good we had it. Although I think a lot of that can also be attributed to the gameplay and just sort of the feel of everything around Call of Duty at the time. The general sentiment is that Verdansk is the GOAT Warzone map, right? And they're finally bringing it back here with Black Ops 6 during spring 2025. If I had to guess personally, that's probably going to be around Warzone's anniversary date. It came out March 10th, 2020, I think is the exact date, somewhere right around there. And so mid-March, I think, is probably that target release date. We'll obviously get more information on that as we do approach that, with potentially the end of season 2, the start of season 3, somewhere around that time. Of course, as any new information does surface regarding Verdansk or any updates around it, I'll be covering all that right here on the channel as it happens. So stay tuned for that alongside everything else going on in Call of Duty by simply hitting that subscribe button, getting us one step closer to 1 million subscribers. And if you enjoy this video while you're at it, a like rating is always seriously appreciated as well. But recently, we actually got some new details on the whole concept of Warzone 1 and a little bit of information on Verdansk as it's going to be returning here in BO6. And unfortunately, it's information that is a little bit concerning because obviously when you think of Verdansk, you're obviously thinking of Warzone 1 gameplay. Those low visual recoil weapons, the general movement with slide canceling and bunny hopping and everything about Warzone 1 gameplay that made it like really feel peak if you're thinking of Warzone in general. Like oftentimes when you get asked what is peak Warzone, players are going to answer MW 2019 Warzone, Cold War Warzone, when we had the haunting events, we had Nakatomi Tower and everything for like the 80s action heroes and stuff. That's oftentimes considered peak Warzone. And since then, as much as they've said, hey, we're going to try and recreate that Warzone 1 vibe, we're going to make changes to reintroduce slide canceling after Warzone 2 just decided to uproot everything and change everything for no real reason whatsoever. They tried to bring that back in Modern Warfare 3 and they got a similar feel, but it definitely was not one-to-one. And I think most players will probably outright say, yeah, it was close, but it's definitely not Warzone 1 still, right? That was its own thing, and truthfully, that'll probably never be achieved again. So much went into Warzone 1 that made it so unique and so nostalgic now, and it'd almost be impossible to, you know, sort of duplicate that or replicate that situation. And in fact, apparently, Swag ended up talking to some developers at some point recently, and he asked them, you know, why can't we bring back that feeling of Warzone 1? Why can't the game move like Warzone 1 or look like Warzone 1? And I'll play the clip out in full for you. This is what he was told directly from the developers.
Hey Swag, have you ever asked the devs why this Warzone does look better and have better movement than the first Warzone? What do they say? We've asked those questions for sure, like, you know what I mean? But it's, their answers are always very like, it's just the direction we went in. You know, it's, when we asked that, we've asked, so can you bring Warzone 1 back? They go, we just can't. They basically explain it like they can't bring Warzone 1 back because Warzone 1 was almost like a, it was almost like a Build-A-Bear. Like it was like almost like it was like small pieces built on top of each other, put together, very complex. This is their words, not mine. And they said they made Warzone 2 and the rest of the Warzones all on one engine. Does that make sense? So that's why.
So I find this clip particularly interesting for a couple of reasons, right? One, he says that Warzone 1 essentially can't be recreated, or they can't go back to Warzone 1 style gameplay because of how the game was built. It was just like sort of a Frankenstein monster, if you will, bits and pieces of all sorts of different things being pushed onto one engine for Warzone and then all throughout MW 2019, Cold War, and Vanguard, right? However, that is so strange to me because when you had this sort of Frankenstein engine and Frankenstein system in place, there were so many problems because of that Frankenstein system. When you had the Cold War integration and it was an absolute mess, and then you had the Vanguard integration and it was an absolute mess. So they go into this new era of Warzone, right, with Warzone 2 and MW 2022, and they say, hey, everything's going to be built on the unified Call of Duty engine now. So MW2 in Warzone, same engine. MW3 in Warzone, same engine. Black Ops 6 in Warzone, same engine. And yet, we still have so many of those repeat scenarios. Now, MW3's integration was not nearly as problematic. It was also the least integration-like not much changed. The weapons were added in and we got Urzikstin, and it wasn't a super significant game-changing integration by any means. Still had its problems though, although they weren't nearly as loud as some other integrations. Black Ops 6's integration obviously completely shattered everything and caused so many issues across the board, despite the fact that it's all this one unified engine. It's all built on the same thing to make things more seamless and make integration smoother, and clearly that has not worked. So this is sort of a weird explanation of why they can't go back to Warzone 1, why they can't, you know, completely redo the movement 1-to-1 or redo the graphics 1-to-1 and things like that. So that said, looking ahead to Verdansk, we're obviously all hoping this to sort of rekindle that fire and that love for Warzone, especially looking at Warzone now where it's in a pretty rough state. Hopefully Verdansk is something that does bring a lot of people back and brings the game back to a better state. But the map just by itself is not going to save Warzone. Just objectively, them just saying, hey, Verdansk is here, that's not going to fix the server issues and the cheating issues and the gameplay issues and all the bugs and glitches that's a list a mile long, right? It's going to say, hey, you know, that's cool. We can go back and play Verdansk again. That'll get some attention for a week if the game's not in a good state. Then everyone's going to realize, oh, hey, it's Verdansk, but boy, this gameplay just doesn't feel good, and they'll hop off back to whatever other game they were playing before Verdansk was released, right? So that's definitely something to keep an eye on with Verdansk. What's the state of the game going to be like when it does end up releasing? But then also, I think a lot of expectations when you hear Verdansk is returning is that the game is going to feel like it did during Warzone 1, and Verdansk will play exactly like it did during Warzone 1, and yet we have all these answers from the devs now saying, yeah, basically, we can't do Warzone 1 again. Like, that's just impossible for us to do, and so it doesn't seem like massive changes for Verdansk are necessarily in play. That sort of recreation of classic Verdansk gameplay, that classic Verdansk feel is in play. I still think it's going to be very cool if they can sort out things with gameplay, but as far as recreating that feeling of Warzone 1, which we all want, I wouldn't necessarily build expectations and build a lot of hope there, just because there's, I think, a very good chance you could be let down in that specific situation. Now, again, hearing their answers, going back to that clip from Swag, I also just wonder, what if they tried to turn on the Warzone 1 servers again? Like, they just simply flipped the switch off. I think there was a bug a little while ago where if you tried to launch into MW 2019 or something from the COD HQ, there was a chance it actually booted you into the Warzone Caldera-like menu, and you could technically queue for like Battle Royale quads. You just never find a game because there are no servers, right? What if they just turned the servers back on? Maybe that's like a last resort for them. Maybe they do launch Verdansk and it is a mess because of the state of the game. And they're like, okay, yeah, we're losing players a ton, and Verdansk was kind of like all of our eggs were in this basket. We were hoping it would just fix things, because I wouldn't be surprised if that was Call of Duty's mindset at this point. What if their last resort is just like, hey, you guys remember Warzone 1 when we just like canceled it because we knew that players would play it more than Warzone 2 because that wasn't a good game? Well, hey, it's back now. I would be really curious to see what would happen there, and if that would actually attribute to any long-term success or long-term resurgence in the player base, because it obviously still have issues too with cheaters and probably server issues as well, just like modern day Warzone, where really nothing has changed. But looking to Verdansk, there are definitely some red flags. There are definitely some concerns here that hopefully will be addressed prior to it releasing. As I said, if we get any new information on this, obviously any new updates go out or anything like that, this is the place to be to stay up to date with all things going on in Call of Duty. So feel free to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date. And if you enjoyed this video, a like rating on your way out would be seriously appreciated. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.